Hello, product people. Welcome to the Product for Product podcast, hosted by Matt Green, data advocate and product manager, and Moshe Mikanovsky, product leader and author. Our goal is to serve the product community by helping you find products that can help make your work in product management easier. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Product for Product podcast.
Welcome back. Today, we're happy to have the co-founder of Aampe, Paul Meinshausen, on the show to talk about the product. How you doing, Paul?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Everything's well.
So where are you talking with us from? Because I know that you're in a very different time zone, Paul, right?
That's right. I'm currently in Singapore. I kind of am in between Singapore and the US. So I'm in Singapore at the moment.
Okay. So I think for us it's evening, but for you it's like the tomorrow morning already.
It's morning. That's right.
It's morning. It's funny because we were talking earlier today for us in the States or in Canada, and you said, yeah, I'm going to bed. I will see you tomorrow. And I'm like, no, we're going to see you today.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's always like funny to hear for me anyway.
Yeah, and my existence is very often in US time zones, so I was up pretty late. So
I'm sure. So tell us a bit about who you are and what is Aampe and how you founded it. Tell us the story.
Yeah, so I have spent most of my career in data science. My background is originally in what you would call computational social science, specifically in anthropology, and then kind of moved over into cognitive science. But when I left academia, for the rest of my career, I've been primarily building models and working with data and building data products. I co-founded another startup in India, a fintech startup, a credit mobile app in 2015. We grew that to be one of the largest in India. It was acquired in 2019. But in that instance, again, I built our data infrastructure and kind of led that side of our work. And my co-founders are similarly data scientists who come from large-scale experimentation. So Sammy did his PhD in neuroscience, Sean did his PhD in cognitive anthropology, and then has worked in a lot of ad tech and other things like that. So we come from a strong experimentation and causal inference and inference side of data science. And we kind of came together to work to build Aampe to solve a big problem in the way mobile apps generate value for their end users and their customers, specifically in terms of how the apps communicate with users so that their value proposition can be contextualized and can be fit to the context of the user, right, across their daily life, their weekly life, the things that they care about. And so that's what we're about. I'm happy to talk more in depth about that, but I'll pause there just as a quick high-level intro.
Definitely, because I know from looking at what Aampe is doing online and also talking with you before that it did take me a bit of a while to understand what you're doing, and then when I saw the value in what you're doing, it was really like a aha moment for me. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for me that when we delve into it in the audio, especially, it will be understood clearly what's the value that you're creating. So let's start maybe from the beginning. Like, who are the users that you build the product for, and what is the problem that you are trying to solve?
So the users we build the product for are product marketers and product managers for consumer mobile apps, and those are the folks who used to be colleagues for us in. I used to be at a real estate housing mobile app and then a fintech mobile app, and worked across many different ones. And internally, we used to build models and used to build recommender systems and all of the intelligence layers that would enable product marketers and product managers to effectively communicate with users and figure out customer lifecycle and understand customer journeys and generate the messaging cycles that support those customer journeys. And so now we're building a SaaS layer, an infrastructure layer, a set of tools that are more generic, and generalizable, so that more product managers and marketers can do what they want to do, and don't necessarily need really large, extensive internal data scientist team that have the time and the space to focus on this particular problem of communication and engagement. So those are our users. And just to kind of give you an example of this, take a consumer mobile app, let's say food delivery, right? And food delivery is a transactional app. It sort of says, let's pay for, a user pays for the value that they derive from it, and they can pay a lot and they can pay a little, and they can use it a lot and they can use it a little. And there's many different, right? There's a whole continuum and a range of the value that a user will generate and that the app will generate from the user. And so there's many different user journeys and many different dimensions to how often a user will use the app. So, right, so they'll always be making a decision. Let's say in the context of food delivery, as people, we're constantly making these decisions about how to live our lives and how to satisfy our needs and our wants. We're ready to eat. Should we make something quick? Should we make something nice? Should we go out to eat? Should we order food? Right, ordering food is one of the options in an array of ways we can satisfy our need in that moment, on that Thursday evening or Wednesday morning. And if we decide to use an app, there are many apps that we could use. And so the decision to use your app is contingent on that person remembering, contingent on possibly the facility that they can find what they want, right? Mm-hmm. So the ease of the search experience, right? The last thing you want to do when you're hungry is open the app and be submerged with choice. There are so many restaurants if you live in an urban center, for example. And so you're submerged with choice, and so you just sort of shut off or you tune out. So, and then in terms of things like price, and so there's so many dimensions to the act of ordering the food, and supporting that user is the job of the product. And so, what Aampe is doing that through the channel and through the medium of messaging, rather than just through the medium of the product itself in terms of the app. Because we think that actually with all of those other choices, and the fact that the reason that person is ordering this food is because probably they want to do something else with their time. They want to be watching a show, or they want to be spending time with their kids. They want to be doing many other things. They're not, in some cases, in those rare cases, right, we can imagine a person really loving to spend 20 minutes thinking through, do I want Vietnamese or I want Japanese? And if I want Japanese, do I want soba or udon or ramen? Maybe sometimes we like that, but the vast majority of times we don't. We want to be satisfied. We want to have food that's delicious and meaningful to us. And so, so one way of doing that is helping them figure that out, helping them be reminded of the app, et cetera. And so what that meant, like how that translates into work for the product manager, is making a bunch of decisions. Who should I message? When should I message? What should I say in the message? Should I give them a tip around, like at the level of, do you want noodles, or should I be more specific in the, in the dish that I'm recommending in the message that they actually want ramen? Should I remind them of the value proposition of convenience, or are they really focused on price right now? And they're actually willing to walk out the door and walk down the block and pick something up in person. But if you tell them that the price here in the app is just as low, okay, then convenience is my second option, I'll go for it. So there's all of these questions that a product marketer or CRM person or a product manager will have. And most of the current tool sets are based on them answering those questions through offline and sort of contiguous analytics. They'll ask the data science team to do a bunch of analytics. They'll come up with segmentations. They'll come up with a bunch of campaigns that are relatively fixed, and then they'll run those. And we see that as a problem because that doesn't really achieve the kind of personalized value that our incredibly diverse user populations expect in 2022. So Aampe is helping to solve that pain point.
I see. So how does it solve it? What's your solution?
Yes, and this is where, and just because I know this is, you guys are doing a startup series, right? So Aampe is relatively new. And when you mentioned looking at the website, and this is more just from a meta perspective of building a company, simplicity of and clarity of what you're building and what your value proposition, right, is always used as a key element of success. If you're building a tool, it needs to be clear. It needs to be super sharp and simple, right? And completely believe in that. There's an interesting aspect for what you might call AI products, or where the product or data product, where it extensively relies on a lot of mechanics that are somewhat scientific in terms of they're really about inference. They're about the technology, the tech behind the interface. And for these kind of products, you have to make sure it works, right? You want your model has to do what you say it does.
Right.
And there's a lot of work that goes into building this kind of a thing. And in fact, in the investor world, there's been an increasing awareness of the differentiation between traditional SaaS and sort of AI SaaS. And that's for different reasons, for computational cost reasons, for many different things. But if you're building in more of what you would think of as an AI product, there's a lot of work you have to do to make sure it works. And that's not just as straightforward as basic SaaS, where you get what you put in.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, so we're at the stage where we're working with some really awesome, amazing companies who understood the problem, who have been product, marketing for long enough, have large user bases. So Aampe, right now, we're about 6 months after launch, manages personalization and messaging for over 45 million users every month. So that's how our measurement of value is at the user level, and we're working with large, there's a large commerce platform in Southeast Asia called Zalora, many other, and we're kind of directly working with them, and they're using it, and we're building it out. And what we haven't done a great job yet of is communicating in the form of our website, because frankly, that's just not really driving our revenue and our business at the moment. It's through other channels. And so we're also sort of working on this problem of how do we generally describe this in a very accessible way. So you asked that question, I would just say what's happening behind the scenes is a combination of what you call systematic randomization and machine learning. And what that means in brief, and this should be familiar to you guys, because you just did this A/B testing series, right? Where
Yes.
you went through a bunch of tools, right? Plum, I think you did Optimizely, right? All of these different ones.
Yes.
And those tools let you run A/B tests where you kind of test something. So you might be like, test the nature of the message, or it might be testing a message sent at a particular time. There's a lot of work to make sure an A/B test is reliable, right? So you have to balance your underlying populations that get assigned to A/B. So if your A and your B is two messages, message A and message B, the thing you want to do at the end of that test is make an inference about the effect message A has versus message B has, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you assign your users, and it happens, let's take something very simple like older people and younger people, and you say there's some behavioral difference between older people and younger people, and somehow you assigned 70% of your users in the population that got treatment A, message A, are younger, and maybe 30% in treatment B. So that there's this severe imbalance in this crucial behavioral, feature behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's really biasing. It's biasing the results.
That's right. You can't make an inference about the message, because you might be making the difference in the results of those two groups might be because of the thing about the users. So that's what I mean by there's a lot of work that's done behind the scenes that usually data scientists do to make sure that you can rely on your tests, right? Now, imagine scaling that out to test every dimension. So instead of testing Wednesday and Thursday, let's test every day of the week, and let's test 5 days times a day. So instead of just, let's assume it's Wednesday and Thursday and both are being sent at 8 p.m. Let's try, in the morning, late morning, early afternoon, middle afternoon, etc. So how do you systematically assign users into all of those groups, observe the response, and then update your decision at the end? And here's the second crucial distinction between an A/B test and what we're enabling through Aampe. At the end of the day, at the end of the A/B test, what you're deciding is which message to run. And you're saying that if A outperformed B, because A was, let's say, whatever, slightly better, you're going to say it's slightly better, and therefore let's use it, right? But the reality of personalization is that you're not interested in, this is not democracy. it's not about what works for the majority and then they impose it on everybody. The point is we have diverse populations of users, and many micro minorities in our user populations who don't want what the majority want. And we're forced to choose because the operational complexity of managing so many different types of messages is too high. And so you choose A or B. And that doesn't have to be. And so you can actually, the outcome should be not A or B, but A or B for user 1, and A or B for user 2, across the 10 million users that you have. That complexity needs to be handled in a way that most of the current communication platforms in the market are not built to handle. They're built to make centralized top-down decisions about A versus B, or at most, 5 user segments that you set up manual campaigns across those segments.
So trying to do it at scale.
At scale, and at user level at scale.
Right. So do you see that as like the future of A/B testing, or the next evolution of A/B testing?
I think that it's the future. Look, nobody cares about, we don't use tools for tools' sake, right?
True.
It's the future of personalization. We used a particular method because that method solves a problem in a feasible way, right? You could use the tool to do something better than you would without that tool. But from a machine perspective, from a data perspective, and from several other perspectives, we've evolved beyond that. And our tool sets need to evolve beyond that as well.
Oh, that definitely sounds very cool. And the way you explained that, I understand the complexity over there, and also how our decisions or our biases could influence other methods that are not machine driven. But also with AI, there could be biases based on how it was the model was built, or stuff like that. How do you deal with that?
I think a clear problem with the way we normally think about AI is we normally think about, and the way normally AI is built is we take historical data and we take models, and those models are of varying complexity and depth. I mean, that's basically what distinguishes, if you're thinking about it from a technical perspective, but there actually is no difference between AI and machine learning. But it's sort of an indicator of the complexity of your model, for example, potentially, which is also a corollary of like the complexity of your underlying data. The bias comes from, or is connected to whatever data you're using. And so, for example, if you want to try and figure out when to send a person a message about food delivery, what you're basically looking at is, when did they order food in the past, and find the place, and conditional on what, right? Because maybe it's at the start of the month, they always order on Thursday, but at the end of the month, they always order on Friday. So, conditional on all these other things, what's best historically. And the problem with that is that historical data atrophies very fast because the world changes very fast, users change very fast. And their experience of the app historically is connected to how you've messaged them historically. And if you've messaged using a rule-based approach, you've only ever sent messages on Wednesday, right? So like you don't actually have the data for the model to learn anything. So in that sense, there's a strong bias. It's biased by the way you've interacted with the user. Amp does differently, and what are kind of one of our core insights that we've built our product on top of is that if you want to remove that, if you want to have a better view, an understanding of your user, you can't rely on historical data. You have to generate data, generate high quality data that's balanced across all of the things that you can fit into the model to condition on or to kind of like bias against. And that comes from the systematic randomization that I was talking about, is that you use your messaging to generate tests at scale that then your model uses to fit over. And actually, that's kind of how performance marketing has worked for many years. Performance marketing is ahead of the curve of CLM and CRM because Google and tools like Facebook are basically running tests at scale.
Yep.
Right? They're not just fitting random forests and machine learning models on top of historical data. They're generating the data that then they fit the models on. And what we're doing is enabling that to happen for a B2C mobile app. The infrastructure they need to make that happen is what Aampe is providing.
Now, you mentioned a few times that it's for mobile app. Why is the focus on that?
Two reasons. One is that, frankly, we just see the world that the way computers in our pocket are just a lot more, are a more, let's say, ergonomic form of tooling than a laptop sitting on our desk. And more of the things we try and solve for, and we saw this with the pandemic, it just all of the trends are pointing in that direction, is as much as possible, we're going to try and use our phones to solve problems. And that's the key technology in our lives. Listening to podcasts, reading books, ordering food, ordering a cab. We do that through a phone. Mm-hmm. And so that's the first reason. And the second reason is a more practical reason, which is, basically when you're designing this kind of thing, this kind of returns back to that distinction between SaaS and AI products. There's a lot of in the weeds technical differences in the infrastructure behind the scenes that can make or break the success of your tool independent, like things that most 99% of people don't care about.
Right.
Right. The way the data, and this is like any product manager for a mobile app knows this, just the way Android structures data and tracks events in the app is different than the way iOS tracks. And so every company has to figure out how to merge their Android and iOS events. Mm-hmm. And, there's all kinds of tools that help you do that and standardize, et cetera. But it's just this random little thing where the data itself is labeled differently, which means your data scientists get it in a noisy way, so it's like this very technical reason. So by focusing on mobile apps rather than saying, let's solve for websites, let's solve for this, et cetera, we're able to keep a more clean, consistent underlying infrastructure that we can build on top of so that we can actually generate the value.
Right.
I saw a note around recommendation system for push notifications. That's something that Moshe and I had talked about in a previous series on in-app messaging and about maybe limiting some of these if you're running these tests, maybe not inundating, potential customers with, all these different notifications. So could you speak to that since you're leaning more towards the mobile environment?
Yeah, I think, if you think about, a lot of times I speak to product marketers or apps or et cetera, who, theoretically they know something, but they forget it in practice, which is they think about push notifications as a tool to generate value for users, but also generate value from the app in terms of increasing MAUs or DAUs or increasing revenue or transactions or click events, whatever their key metric is. And as a tool, you can put it on like a scorecard, right? From 0 to 1, where it's completely ineffective, your messages aren't doing anything, or your messages are super, super, super effective, or somewhere in between. And so they think of it on that scale, and then they think like, okay, how can I move up the scale? I'm going to go from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.3, right? And it's always about just growth from the point where you are. And my thought there is like, be reminded that the scale is not 0 to 1. It's -1 to 1. A tool is not just not helpful or helpful. It is counter-helpful or counterproductive. Because exactly for the reasons you said, right? Push notifications can annoy people. They do annoy people. They can drive you away. They can reduce the effectiveness of an application. Now, all you have to do is go over to Twitter, take your favorite app, type in the app, type in the push notification. And if it's a large enough app, you're going to find tons and tons of people tweeting about how annoying they find a push notification for any number of reasons. And actually, you'll find a ton of hilarious ones. So it's like, it's worth doing because it's just funny how people find humor in pain. So the point is, if you know that, then getting your communication right is not just nice to have.
Yes,
you better get it right, or you're actively harming yourself.
Right, you may only get one chance at this, right? So you better get it right the first time.
You almost certainly only get one chance at it for one user, and then what you're really just doing is churning through your customer acquisition, and you're getting tons of chances in the form of new users, but you've lost that. You got one chance and it's done.
Yeah, they're rushing to turn off the notification. They're like, this is annoying, or this isn't personalized enough to me.
And then what they're doing is rushing to turn off the app and uninstall the app and remove the app.
That's good. That's a really good point.
They're not just turning off the push notification, they're turning off the app. And this is the reality that as a product manager you face in 2022, especially for mobile product managers. You face a lower barrier to entry from your competitors than ever before. There are more and more apps. Any industry or like vertical you could think of, there are more apps than ever before. It's easy to build apps and it's easy to stand up businesses now, relatively speaking. And so for example, meditation apps, I was use this statistic. Since something like 2015, I believe, there's been about 2,500 meditation apps released across the App Store and the Play Store. Meditation is a multi-billion-dollar business. It's solving a clear need for people in the world today, right?
Yeah.
Like, help us. We need to breathe. But there are so many apps helping you do that. They're helping you through content. They're helping you through special sounds that like bring peace to you, waterfall, a creek running, through guided meditation, through community meditation. There are so many different ways to do it and solve the problem. There's so many apps. So if an app doesn't work, if it bothers you, if it annoys you, you can go find another one. And it's true for food delivery. It's true for entertainment, all the streaming apps that you can watch, right? So yeah, absolutely. Users are not starved for choice, and therefore their demands are high.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in the case of the meditation app, for example, where it doesn't sell really anything, it's more for your health, and you use it when you use it. What type of use cases of customization or personalization that you might want to the product manager of the app would like to try to do there, and they might use Aampe for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think meditation is a perfect example, because if you come back to this question of value for a user, value comes in the form of where meditation fits into your life in terms of time. It comes into the rhythm and the regularity in which it interfaces with your life, but it also comes into how it's framed. Take a related thing like yoga. One of the things I first noticed when I was doing yoga in India, when I moved there for the first time, was yoga instructors in India are often really harsh. So in the US, they're often like, find yourself, very peaceful.
Non-judgmental, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, non-judgmental, right? It's all about non-judgment. It's okay, don't strive, do what you do, right? In India, it's like, back up, like get your back up, like get into position, because if you're not in position, it's not going to work. So it's like, it can come off as harsh at first. Mm-hmm. It has its value because it's sort of saying, there's a sort of a performance to it, which is actually pretty cool, but it's a very different experience. So think about how your app speaks to you. Some people want it to speak to you like a coach with saying, get off the couch and meditate, right? Mm-hmm. Some people need it to be super gentle because you're just not feeling well, right? And then what kind of content is appropriate in terms of reminding you of the value of meditation, or telling you don't worry too much about it. And just here's a simple thought to share for the day that can help put your mind at ease. There's so many ways you can say something, and so many things you can say, and then so many times. And just take timing. The way a lot of the better meditation apps try and solve for this is they will ask you when you set up the app, when do you want a daily reminder?
Right. So all different configurations that you have to set up. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but really the way people do this, the optionality is not that much. You set a time. That's it. Yeah. That's all the options they give you. So you say 8 p.m. The problem is our lives are not that fixed. Mm-hmm. We don't meditate every day at 8 p.m. because 8 p.m. is different on a Thursday from a Saturday. And it's different on this Thursday from 3 Thursdays ago because, you have a new job, or a child is no longer at school, or whatever reason it is. And so
I didn't wake up.
Yeah. Rules aren't really sufficient. They don't really match to the dynamism of our lives. And
I see.
It's possible to do better than those rules. It's possible to be more responsive. It's possible to just naturally reduce the frequency of a message. It's possible to slightly shift the content. That's another thing, right? Think about like a streaming app. You may love drama, but you are not 100% drama person. And if you watch drama, you want a comedy break. So if I just learn from historical data, my recommender, it's like, well, this person liked drama, so do drama. But and this is a classic challenge of recommenders, is actually people have a desire for newness. They have a desire for freshness. There's a point at which we get tired of things. The best recommender system is a friend who knows you and is responsive to your context and is just paying attention to where you are in life at the moment. And that, like, you've been watching a lot of drama and you might like to try something a little different.
Right.
And I think that's how a product can work too, if it's similarly attuned to your context, and if it's structured in the right way to enable it to learn from your behavior and from tests.
Yeah, this is really fascinating. And when you say that, I was the next question in my head was, does Netflix already using you? Because it sounds like the exact place where something like Aampe should be.
Yeah, Netflix is a great company to ask about, because I would say Netflix is definitely not using us. And I'm not sure, like, Netflix is one of those large companies with lots, they're known for the quality of the data science. So I'm not sure they would outsource this, although I'd love them to. They have an entire product messaging team, and they have a blog site where they talk about the stuff they do. A lot of the limitations are still there. So I think Netflix can do a lot better, but they're clear leaders in the field, and a lot of folks pay attention to them. I think that there's a gap there in the fact that most mobile apps cannot achieve the kind of precision that Netflix does because of Netflix's resources and brand, et cetera. You can't put together a data science team of Netflix's quality for the vast majority of apps. We did
hear it in the past that many of these large organizations that are many years into this and have a lot of innovation do build these tools in-house. So
that's true.
Yeah.
But in this case, actually, we actually are. I can't name names yet, but we are working with some like very large, well-known large apps. And the reason I think I'm less concerned about the building in-house thing is just that there's so much detail that you need to handle to solve for this particular problem. It doesn't matter how well resourced you are, how big you are, whatever, there is always more work to do. A lot of these large companies and sort of the ones that are super well funded and the best in the world, they would tend to build these things in-house. Yeah. And I would say actually there's just so much detail in the implementation of the infrastructure to enable this parallelization and then monitoring on top of app data, and a lot of particularities to it, that it's really, I think the best in the world are also just really smart about knowing what to build and what not to build, and where it's not a core investment for their product and their business. And if there's a good tool in the market, they'll use it. And that's not something that keeps me up at night as a founder or
absolutely. No, this sounds like a very promising product. I'm really excited to see where you guys are going with that. Tell us a bit about the company itself, how product centered you are, which tools you guys are using. It's always interesting to hear.
So we started in the late spring of 2020. So kind of as the pandemic was just starting. And so before it was really clear what was going to happen. And when we started, we knew we were going to be a fully remote, globally distributed team, because Sean and Sammy and I knew we wanted to work together. I'd worked with both of them in the past many times. And I just, known Sean for over 10 years. He officiated my wedding. We were just very close. So we knew that. And I knew that there were many other people that we wanted to work with. So for example, there's this super sharp data scientist who I worked with at 2 different startups. She came to my last one. She's amazing. And I just knew I wanted to work with her again. So we intended to build that way, and we've been that way through. And there's a lot of implications to that. I would talk about those. We also just really started as a very lean engineering team. So we're now still just 11 people. We are seed backed by Sequoia in Asia. And until this past November, I was the only person doing any kind of business marketing. We haven't done any marketing, but in terms of anything like that. And that has implications for, again, to the website and things like that. But in terms of the tools we've used to handle the fully remote thing. To build, there's some pretty fun tools. We're very product focused because of, that's what we are building, and a lot of our product is behind the scenes. It's algorithms and it's pipelines that manifest in an increasingly cool UI. So now we just had a designer join us in Berlin who's really thinking deeply about how does a person ingest this insight? How do they sit on top of this sort of massive parallelization and machine learning that it's very hard to understand? An A/B test is also just simple, right? To understand A, B. So we're putting a lot of effort into that. But some quick tools, for example, we do all of our product management and building through a tool called Fabricator, rather than like a Trello or an Asana, the kind of normal tools you think about. Because Fabricator is an open source tool that was built out at Facebook, and then it actually was discontinued recently, which I'm very sad about. But it's very cool because it's code level product management, and so it very seamlessly integrates with GitLab or GitHub. So you can kind of connect your cards and your epics and things like that if you're doing something agile or thinking about how you're structuring your sprint cycles. And it kind of connects right into code commits. And so, rather than having like these cards and then you've got your commits and your pull requests and your merge requests, those things are sitting just super tight together, and it's much more seamless to just update your cycle and know where you are and know when you need to come back and fix a feature, and how to prioritize. So that's a pretty cool tool that I would plug for those that are more technical product teams. And then, we use standard stack, Slack, Google Drive.
Cool. That's always great to hear, and great to hear about new products. So that's always fun. Nice. A very fascinating area where you are. And like I said before, I'm really be interested to see where you guys are going and how it evolves, because it does sound like there is a lot of opportunity over there for things that we can't even think about when we're trying to do different type of experiments. Or like I'm kind of trying not to use the terminology A/B testing, because like when I asked you about that before, you kind of rightly explained that this is much more than that. It's about personalization, and it's about getting the right message to the right person in the right time. So it's.
Let me respond to that quickly, because I think that's a great issue. And actually, I wanted to summarize, why I appreciate coming on this podcast and you guys engaging with us, and give me a quick plug that's at the end. It's going to bury the lead for why I'm super happy to have product managers who are maybe less technical and don't necessarily really care about the detail of this. Why I understand the whole, elevator pitch, explain it to a 5-year-old, simplicity. I understand and I respect all those things. My feedback as a data scientist who's worked for years with product managers is there is also a time and place for us to struggle with the mental models we use in order to advance, in order for the tools we use to really be able to progress our work. We have to occasionally be open to work changes in the way in our workflow. Not everybody will be, but I think certain, thoughtful, product managers who want to be at the bleeding edge, who want to sort of say, let's do something better. And my simple historical example of this is just a simple spreadsheet. I once heard this podcast, I think it was an NPR podcast, I think Planet Money maybe, or one of those, where it was basically talking about, the spreadsheet. And basically before the 1970s, almost businesses didn't really use spreadsheets, because in order to do a spreadsheet, you'd have this big table, right? And the accountants would unroll this large roll of paper, and they would build out this large matrix and then fill in the rows and columns. But think about it. If you write one of those columns or rows wrong, or you need to change a parameter, it's all written in a pen or a pencil on a large sheet of paper. You have to go back and change it, right? So it just wasn't worth the effort, and so you would do other things. And then the UI of a computer came along, and then like the first spreadsheet softwares came along, and all of a sudden you could do this in this amazing way of just like plugging in and changing and updating a model and doing this thing. And the mental model of thinking in terms of rows and columns was not intuitive. It was not obvious. We forget this, but it's not, because now we all do it. And that didn't automate away accountants' jobs. It actually enabled them to think and construct business models and financial accounting schemes that allowed incredible complexity in business that never could have been achieved without that. Such that now every it's almost like a basic business literacy to be able to work with rows and columns in Excel. I think it's just very subtle, and it's just one of the most amazing pieces of software and tools ever in terms of its consistency and in terms of all the things that it's unlocked.
Yeah.
And I think but it's a struggle. It's not like everyone just could pick up and sit in a spreadsheet and just use it naturally. And so I think there are things about how we build products for user where there needs to be some workflow changes. We need to sort of struggle with the mental models we use because they lock us. And so A/B test is a great example. It's been a useful mental model. It's good. Somehow we have to push past it. Otherwise, we're going to be maxed out at the value it can offer, and if we're not able to shift away from it. So I'm doing my best to try to simplify and constantly work to make it as clear as possible. And I think it's also a two-way street. So I'm trying to also evangelize please be patient with this kind of thing, and spend the extra 5 or 10 minutes thinking about it, because I really think it's an investment that will pay off in terms of our jobs as product managers.
I sure hope at this time that we will have also a video podcast, because then we would be able to also show everyone what you're talking about. Because I think seeing it is definitely, and you've shown it before, a quick demo. So seeing it is definitely a much better way to understand it. That's right. You're right. I mean, you gave a great example over there with a spreadsheet and then A/B testing. I can tell personally that when I had one job that I was a product manager for an AI product, and when I started that, my mental model was so upside down about what it is, and I had to learn what is AI is all about and machine learning and how does it fits into product management. And that was really, for me, a big change. So this is another example that if someone experienced that in the past could relate to, I'm sure.
Just briefly about integrations. I know you're still in the pilot version of Amp, and I did notice some documentation on the site about integrations with Segment and Mixpanel and stuff like that.
I think that's a great question. Our thesis and our principle is to be very open in terms of architecture and know that we're building on top of a lot of existing tools, exactly so that we don't have to rebuild the functionality of those the underlying communication tools. And so, on our site, we've got a bunch of documentation. I'll just name a couple of quick names so people are familiar. For example, we have customers who are using Amplitude, Segment, Braze. In Asia, tools like CleverTap, MoEngage, definitely Mixpanel, and then Firebase Messenger, and Firebase, GCP, Google Cloud Messenger, and several others that are maybe a little bit less well known. But all of those they're using, and what AMP does is just to connect to those via API. And then either if it's a tool like Braze, it fires the Braze API to send out a message, or if it's a tool like Segment, it sort of connects and receives data from Segment. So integration is just like the least interesting thing, because it actually is not that big of a problem. We've never had an integration take more than 1 or 2 calls, a couple of hours, and we've seen a lot of different complex layouts. Moving data around, we figured it out. Connecting to tools with it, through APIs is just not the big issue.
That's awesome that you have it, and that we've talked about it before. Focus on what you're great at, and allow other tools to focus on what they're great at, and then just combine them into something that's good for the customer. And
be open for the ecosystem out there. So be plugged into what's already there.
Yeah, it scales your product in the greater stack of tools. So I think it's great, and thanks for pointing that out, what AMP was able to work with. So looking forward to hearing more about AMP in the future. It's a really exciting space. Anytime we mix data and ML and product together, it just continues my fascination with how product management has become almost driven a lot by data. And obviously this ML space has really grown in product management too. So I'm really interested in what AMP is doing.
Yeah, I appreciate your guys' interest and enthusiasm, and just general your podcast is an awesome resource. You guys have done a lot of cool episodes, and I was very happy to be one of them.
Awesome, and we're happy to hear that. Where can people reach out to you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I won't spell my last name, but it's spelled I'm sure in the episode.
Yes.
You can find me there. I'm also at paul@amp.com. So Amp is just the name of the company. A little bit tricky in that there's two A's, sorry, AAMPE, but amp.com, Paul at Amp, and LinkedIn. And I'm also on Twitter at PMAINS. But you'll find me. If you want to find me, you'll find me as the web. And I'm super eager to talk. So if you have critiques or suggestions or anything, or you just want to hear more about AMP, please do reach out, and I'll be happy to chat.
Yeah, and if someone heard about AMP from the podcast, it will be great when they reach out to you if they let you know. So this way we also know that we had some value.
Agreed. Yeah, yep. And I will let you guys know.
Perfect.
Awesome.
It's all about data pipelines.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, thank you, Paul, again. Thank you, Moshe. Thank you to all the listeners. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.